I'm Tisha Dolton. May 1st, 1990. I will always remember the date for two reasons. First, Don Henley was performing at the Nick in Albany, and there were still tickets available, and a couple of my friends were going. So I was kind of hoping that if everything went all right this afternoon, my mom would let me go. Secondly, just the week before, I had turned 16. So we all know what happens when you turn 16, right? Learner's permit. So after school, my mother and I get into her 1988 Plymouth Horizon, maroon, the first new car my parents ever owned. And we drive 10 and a half miles or so north to the DMV in Fort Edward. We go in, I sit in one of those little desk chair things that nobody really fits in, staring at this blank wall, and I'm taking this test. And I had studied the DMV manual like the good little straight A student I was, so I was pretty well prepared, but I was still nervous. The butterflies in my stomach were like slowly turning into hornet's nest. So I finished the test and I turned it in, and they grade it right there, which is kind of nerve-wracking. But I got a 100, a perfect score, so I left with my permit. Oh, great. So my mom and I go out to the car, we get in, but I have this thing ringing in my ears. My dad had said to my mother before we left, Tamaris, do not let her drive home. I don't care what score she gets. Don't let her drive. So my mother got into the driver's seat. I got into the passenger seat. We rolled down the windows because it was still a roll down window car. My mother drives out of the parking lot. We head home. But 2 miles before we get home, my mother pulls off to the side of the road. A little worried about what's going on. But she says, get out, you're going to drive home. And I was like, but Dad said I can't drive home. And she's like, I'm your mother. I'm with you. You can drive home. You don't really say no to my mother. So I got out of the car, went around the back, got into the driver's seat, adjusted the seat, adjusted my mirrors, put my seatbelt on, put the car in park, looked down the road. Nobody was coming from the south. Looked to the north. There was a car coming, so I waited. No, still nobody coming from the south. The north car passes, and now there's nobody else coming. So I'm like, okay. So I ease my foot off the brake, and I start to get on the road. But where she had pulled off was kind of like this little tiny curve, and it was kind of banked a little bit. So when I start to get on the road, I'm kind of going like a little bit downhill. So I wind up in the wrong lane, and my mother yanks the car wheel. And I yank it back because, she yanked the wheel. So I wind up no longer on the road. I wind up on the other side of the guardrail, driving down the grass and the sandy area that used to be the old canal. And my brain is thinking, Tisha, put on the brake, put on the brake, put on the brake. So I slam on the brake, and the car turns and flips. So my mother and I are hanging upside down in her new car. The folks down the road had actually been just about leaving their house, so they had seen some version of this. They come out. My mother was able to get out of the car because luckily we had the windows rolled down, but I couldn't get out. So one of the gentlemen went between me and the steering wheel and stayed there, and I'm thinking, what are they doing? And the other gentleman clicks the button on the release on my seatbelt, and I fall into this poor man. But they pull me out of the car, and we eventually are standing on the side of the road, and the ambulance comes, and we're okay. The policeman comes and says, I'm going to have to give you a ticket. So he gives me a ticket for failure to keep right. Makes sense, but it's a moving violation, and I just got my permit. So I'm thinking, really not going to the Don Henley concert. But the biggest thing is that to this day, I still don't know if my dad's more mad about me wrecking the car the first time I ever drove, or having to pay $300 for my ticket to be switched to parking on the side of the road.